Okay, today is October 10th, 2022. I'm Stefanie Burich and I'm here with Jennifer Andrulli, and I'm calling in from Anchorage, Alaska, and this is a Zoom interview. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed today. As you know, we will be talking about the various uses of plants, and this and other recordings regarding ethnobotany will become part of the oral history collection at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, and will be placed online in an ethnobotany project jukebox hosted by the university. So thank you for sharing your story today, and let us start with traditional introductions. Can you please ground us in where you are from and who your family is, and your name and the name of your parents and grandparents and where they're from?
Hello, my name is Jennifer Andrulli. I live and work on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabaskan in South Central Alaska. My Yupik name is Ushka. I'm named after my great-grandmother, Helen Jo of Soldotna, and she has ancestral ties to Tanunuk. My grandparents are the late Al and Rose Hagen of Manly Hot Springs and the late Robert and Flora Andrulli of Matera, Italy. My parents are Karen Brooks of Manly Hot Springs and Jim Andrulli of Fairbanks.
Thank you. Can you talk about your first memory of playing with plants?
I grew up in Manly Hot Springs in the late 70s, and the plants surrounding my house were cranberry bushes, low bush cranberries, Labrador tea, and we had this beautiful garden. My mom was an early adopter to agricultural methods and found a mentor. And with the cultivation of gardens, we had these amazing plants that were also new to Alaska. I had, and because I could eat them, it was wonderful because my mom showed me, hey, you can eat this and that and this. And so my first plants were berries, chickweed, the wild chamomile buttons, the little pineapple weed, strawberry blight, which was a bright red plant that tasted like strawberries when strawberries weren't in season, and spruce tips. And I just remember playing on the rabbit trails around our house, and along those trails all these plants grew, and I would shift between being me and pretending to be a rabbit, pretending to be a bird. And without my mom's knowing, I was tasting everything. I'm like, hey, if I'm a bird, I can eat this and that and the other thing. So I was always experimenting and exploring.
And what was the first plant that called out to you to use medicinally, and how did that happen?
Growing up, my mom had a healing center and a wellness center in Fairbanks, Alaska, and she picked very specific plants for medicinal use in her wellness center, and that was arnica frigida. It grows up in the high country on the way to Manly and in the Chugach Mountains and on the roadside close to Fairbanks and over by Glen Allen. So we'd go on these adventures to pick arnica. And arnica is an anti-inflammatory when used externally. And that was the first plant. And then the second plant was cottonwood oil. We'd make cottonwood balm, and that was for patients who had acute and chronic pain, and also for depression. The smell of spring in a bottle is cottonwood oil. And for myself, learning from my mom and my grandma and teachers in interior Alaska, we were very lucky to have some herbalists that shared their knowledge and an ethnobotanist. So Deborah McCorkle from Alaska Herb Works was one of my primary herbalism teachers, and Terry Burich wrote a book called Alaska Wilderness Medicines, which has been in my life my whole life and helped my family revitalize our plant knowledge. I didn't start learning plants outside of my family lineage until I was in my 20s, and I moved to Anchorage, Alaska. And I was so far from my traditional harvesting places, I had to find new plants to work with, new berry patches, and I started a lifelong study of plants, new to me and new to my family. And then in my travels in the United States, in Central and South America, I studied plants with the indigenous people I sat with, looking for similarities, looking for plants that could help my patients here in Alaska, plants that could help me.
Thank you for sharing. So would you say that your interest in and appreciation for plants, medicinal plants, has started with your family, seeing your mother and other family members using plants medicinally and kind of in your everyday life?
My family is orphans and immigrants. We're survivors. My Yupik family survived the Spanish flu pandemic, and my Siberian Yupik family survived being stuck on this side of the border, and they could no longer go back and forth. And we survived boarding school internment. And literally 3 generations ago, my great-grandmother survived cultural collapse of traditional hunting and gathering in the traditional egalitarian society. And then on my Italian family, they fled Italy in 1909, and they also had to find new plants. What grew in their gardens didn't grow in Massachusetts, Nevada, and Alaska. And so they had to, on both sides of my great-grandparents and grandparents' generation, figure out new ways of surviving and thriving in the new landscapes. My Yupik family was moved inland to Athabascan land, to Katna, Glen Allen, Chitna, Manly Hot Springs. These were plants we didn't know historically. And so growing up, my mom learned about 10 plants that she really, really liked to work with, taught those to me, and then I started learning 10 more plants. I call this the Great Remembering. Many Alaska Natives have this story, and many American Indians have this story of losing ties to the land after colonization. And this is the Great Remembering, and it's tied to the land. Our healing is tied to the land. And as a group of Alaska Natives, all tribes have worked together since ANCSA towards healing, understanding, truth, and transformation. One of the ways is through plant medicine, and that's where my family comes in. That was something we were drawn to be rememberers of and teachers of. There's many ways of healing and transformation, and it all starts with truth. To tell the story of our great-grandparents, to hold that, the trauma then will help us heal, understand, and transform. So my mom took me out into nature. We gathered very specific plants. And then in that process, she taught me how to navigate the land, gather with others, be aware of our surroundings from many perspectives, safety, bear awareness, keeping all your tools together, being organized and clean and harvesting, protocols of prayer and thankfulness and intention, orientation to the sun and the universe as a way of finding our way in the forest, and then making the whole experience an adventure, making it fun and celebration with food and music, family and friends. I think that because she put this effort into creating an experience of gathering and preserving, that was based in celebration and respect, from the patience of harvesting and cleaning to the stirring of the jam pot and the sterilization process. It was filled with richness and depth and deepness and transmission of our family stories, all sides of our story in great detail, stirred into the pot of jam, stirred into the oils we made. And this was our truth. And she would say, hold this truth, it sets us free. So as an adult, I just continued this tradition of picking berries and making plant medicine for pain and inflammation and curiosity and being of service to others. For a long time, I had no physical complaints other than repetition, pain, and inflammation. So when I had friends or patients who had issues, I would look for the plant that would help them in their process. And I had the freedom to do so. Alaska plant medicine is not legislated and protected with some form of licensing. We're free to practice our traditional healing, indigenous medicine. And I wove that into my life.
Wow, thank you for sharing. That's very powerful. Several questions that came up. You talked about, I just want to take you back to where you talked about the great remembering. Can you talk more about that concept before we go, and before I ask you more about the specifics about plants? It sounds to me like you're referring to something a little more spiritual or less tangible than perhaps just plants, because you talked about, the tradition was cut off to some extent, and then you're going back to what you call the great remembering. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Okay, thank you for the question. In 1918, there was the Spanish flu pandemic that was very destructive to Alaska Native culture. In some villages, everybody died. In some villages, half the people died. Every village is different. We all have a story about that in our family. So between contact by the Russians in the mid-1700s to that pandemic, it's estimated that 75 to 85% of Alaska Natives died in that time period. And I say, as Alaska Natives, we've survived the cataclysm, and we are survivors of this great death, it's called. And For my family, it was 3 generations ago when my great-grandmother was orphaned in 1918. And she was raised in a mission school by missionaries. And for my family, that was the great forgetting of our language. We had other culture. My great-grandmother still got her chin tattoos on the inside of her lip instead of the outside. She still spoke Yupik and danced and carried plant medicine. She was an attendant at births and deaths. She helped people transition into life and into the spirit world, as did my grandmother, my mother, and myself. We do this work, holding space at those places of transition, rites of passage. Every family is going through their own remembering process. And we're doing this in a variety of ways. Language revitalization, traditional ecological knowledge revitalization, which is wayfinding with the stars, working with the animal hides to create moose tan, deer tan in the native style, so we do not forget these very important ways of being that equal thriving in this ecosystem, the Arctic and subarctic, maintaining our connection to our traditional ecological knowledge for our prophets, which we have in Alaska Native cultures. There's elders and seers and dreamers who tell the story of the cycles of time, the migrations of people through the changing landscape. And it's vital to maintain traditions, so when the cycle shifts once more, we will thrive, continue to thrive in this ecosystem. Our elders say, watch the plants and animals. They will start to move. We'll see the cycle change in the migration of plants and animals. Follow the plants and animals. And these stories were passed down in my village of Manly Hot Springs, which is Koyukon Athabascan, Caribou Clan. The elders say, keep a bag by the door, be ready to go to the hills. Change will come from the east. And such great advice, because we hear this in our health and safety training. We live here in South Central Alaska in a earthquake zone, and we're told to be prepared. Be prepared. Change will come. Have water, have fuel, fire starter. What we're doing, the youth, I'm just honoring the elders and youth. At some point I was a youth who picked up this remembering, and I'll be an elder one day. But it's through our will and intention that we are reclaiming and revitalizing our culture, nurturing our resilience. Because knowing our connection to the land, knowing the names, this is part of our vitality, knowing our plants that contain all the nutrients we need to thrive. This is resilience. So this is occurring through some of our work with plant knowledge, for without plants we would not exist. And we are here, each of us, all over the world, because our ancestors knew the plants. One of my favorite Yupik creation stories as a child is that we emerged fully formed human beings, real human beings, out of the seed pod of the beach pea plant. That we are old and ancient and wise, and within our genes we are connected to each other in the universe through the eye of awareness. And that's what I mean when I talk about the great remembering.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's very powerful and very deep and insightful. You talk about the process of knowledge and how you remember and how you gain your own knowledge. Can you elaborate about that a little more? Just the sources of knowledge, knowledge transmission. How would somebody learn about plants? You mentioned a few teachers. Can you talk about that more?
I believe that we know in our hearts when we're called to our gift. And one of the gifts is working with plant medicine. So those who are drawn to work with plants know that it's a gift. And with patience and practice and questioning, spending time with living teachers, reading books. Now we can watch videos, have access to so much information. With practice, every year we learn more. So come to the work with a question. Sometimes that question is a personal challenge or struggle with health and well-being. Sometimes it's that challenge or struggle of a loved one. Sometimes it's that quest for knowledge, education, certification, etc. There's many reasons we come to plant medicine. Teachers can be difficult to find in the urban setting, even in rural villages. Some villages have no one who remembers plant medicine or plants beyond berries or some of the fermented plants, whereas we used to know and name all the plants in our reality. And so come to the work with an open heart, with diligent compassion for self, for family, for the story. Seek the truth of the family story and have the journey of plant medicine heal the trauma in the family line. Because it's out in nature gathering and hunting and being in nature in prayer with intention that great healing occurs. The healing occurs when we're on the land with intention and prayer and with thoughtfulness. And so bring that on your search. And teachers will come. When the student is ready, the teachers will come. That's how it's always been. We have amazing programs at the Alaska Native Heritage Center in Anchorage and the regional healthcare systems throughout the state of Alaska have traditional healers on staff. What's interesting, though, and a challenge for the traditional healers working in the Indian Health Service system is they cannot talk very much about plants due to pharmacological interactions and contraindications. So look for teachers. There's opportunity at the University of Alaska, ethnobotany programs can be very helpful, looking for Alaska Natives who completed the ethnobotany training are wonderful teachers, and there's more and more and more of those. And my favorite pocket manuals are Terry Burich's book, Alaska Wilderness Medicines, because in the back there's a list of conditions that plants can assist us with, the therapeutic uses of plants. And that's how I've learned the most, is when I have a challenging healthcare concern, I look first to the plants, and then weaving my traditional medicine with Western medicine, I create a treatment plan, and I work together with my doctor.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And you were talking about part of the healing processes, kind of following the protocols, being out on the land, gathering, having an orientation. Can you talk about that a little bit more, just harvesting protocols and kind of the inner orientation, the prayers you talked about?
We go to the land with intention, and then we say a prayer. Once we get on the land, we say a prayer and make an offering for the support of nature, that we live in reciprocal relationship with the plants, the mycelial network, and the animals on the land. And we often go to very specific gathering places for very specific plants, but open to the universe to gift us with feathers and minerals and driftwood and beautiful gifts to bring back for our land, or even to gift to others. But it all starts with intention and prayer. And we'll leave an offering. The offering can be as simple as a piece of hair, or can be plant medicine from another place that we'll leave in exchange with that intention of exchange. Or say we picked some plants that were very helpful and beneficial for a patient, then that extra offering, that gift of something greater for that exchange, just out of respect for our green brothers and sisters, the plant people. Every protocol for every family is going to be different, and it's accurate and perfect just the way it is. And this respect for the plants, I really am honored to see it woven into non-native writings about gathering. I'm seeing it in the Bioneers conferences, where non-natives are taking up our respect for nature, the protection of nature, to take only what we need and leave 2/3 for the plant family and for the animals of the area. So in my family, we take around, if we're picking berries, 1/3 of the berries. When we can, we travel further off the trail to allow for elders to stay closer to the trail. But, I mean, when I say 1/3 of the blueberries and the entire hillside is covered in blueberries, and it's like 25 acres of blueberries, there's often more blueberries than we can harvest,
right,
or cranberries. But it really matters when it comes into Devil's Club patches or rhodiola, or if you take too many spruce tips off of a tree, it changes the tree's growth pattern and